Hey guys, well, my name is Kevin Cirilli and I am an advisor to Blue Star Families. And I'm so excited and grateful that my friend Ryan Callahan asked me to moderate today's important conversation about cybersecurity and threats. And we have honestly an awesome panel. And I really think that it would be in everyone's best interest if they could introduce themselves. So I'll go around the horn one by one. And the first is my friend, Lieutenant General Mary O'Brien. She is the former Director of Command Control Communications and Computers Cyber for the Joint Chiefs. And she also, of course, served in the U.S. Air Force. General O'Brien, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm retired now, Kevin, so I go by Mary now. But what's not in my official Air Force bio is I'm part of a double military family. My husband is a retired Marine. I was in the Air Force for 30 years. We have military children, and I lost track of how many moves we've made. And I just want to say that Blue Star Families has been a great resource for us as we've moved around the country and been able to meet up with lots of other military families. So I'm happy to give back in this way. This is PCS season, and there's a lot of people, in U-Hauls and packed cars going to their next duty station.
For sure, for sure. And we're also joined by Allie Armisen, and Allie is the Executive Director at Cybercrime Support Network. Allie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm an Army veteran. I was not a general. I did 10 years and got out, but my husband is still in, and I'm actually shaking off my last PCS. I just moved here 3 weeks ago, so it's all just fresh in my mind. So I'm really excited to talk about it today and give you guys some tips. So thank you so much for having me. This is a passion of ours at CSN, so we really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Of course, of course. And Chip Colweiler, he, of course, is the Senior Vice President of Security at the Navy Federal Credit Union, another great organization. Chip, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. So I lead the fraud team here. Have no military background, so honored to be on this panel. But I have moved a lot in my life, including overseas. I was a fraud consultant for a little while, lived over in the Czech Republic, and just have been in the fraud space for 20 plus years. I've seen it grow and evolve and all the scams and unauthorized transactions. So happy to share my expertise and hopefully help out for the next few minutes.
A lot of fraudsters, a lot of fraudsters. I also did not serve in the military and advise Blue Star Families, I guess, is I like to say the translator in chief between the 1% of the brave men and women who do serve in uniform and the rest of us, 99%, and try to bridge that gap at Blue Star Families, which of course our CEO, Kathy Roth-Duquet, has done just so incredibly well in our 15 years since we've been around, trying to bridge between the civilian and the military communities. I see we've got Tuna in. I was wondering if the big fish was going to sorry, I can't help it. They said I was allowed to call you Tuna. But of course, he's Lieutenant General retired, but Lieutenant General Charles Moore, former Deputy Commander of U.S. Cyber Command. And first, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'm actually genuinely curious to know where the nickname comes from.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me today. And I want to start by thanking Blue Star Families as well for not only hosting the webinar, but for the unwavering support that you guys show to our military families. And my colleagues and I at ORA are greatly appreciative of all that you guys do. I also want to thank everybody that's joining the webinar today, all of our military families and members. We greatly appreciate your service. So I served 33 years in the United States Air Force. I retired about 22 months ago as the Deputy Commander at U.S. Cyber Command. I go by Tuna. Yes, I spent the first about 25 years of my career flying F-16s, and everybody knows that pilots get call signs, and I'm a very big water sports fan, and I go by Charlie. And so Charlie the Tuna, if you're familiar with Star-Kissed Tuna, that's where it comes from.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I guess the first thing that I want to ask is, and this will be to you, can I call you Tuna, or is everyone okay if I call you by? I always ask Mary. Mary insists that I call her Mary, and I'm like, okay, as long as I don't want to be disrespectful. But Tuna, I would say Can you describe the threat? Because I think a lot of people, when they hear cybersecurity, I always think, for example, of my dad's Norton antivirus thing that would like keep out the viruses that from Napster when I was a kid and I was downloading music. So what is actually the threat? Because clearly it's way more evolved than it was back then. And I also think a lot of people still have a hard time defining it.
Yeah, Kevin, I think this is a great place to start. And the threat to military members and their families from cyber criminals is quite significant, because increasingly more and more of our personal information is of course stored and then accessed online, making it very vulnerable to identity theft and financial fraud and privacy breaches, etc. And so of course, when you take that and then you think about all the connected devices and online services and social media that exist, that further amplifies the risk that we see from cyber criminals who use very sophisticated techniques these days to exploit vulnerabilities that they can find and to target people that are less equipped to defend themselves from such attacks. And the other thing is now, of course, we see the advancement of tools that we're generally referring to as AI, artificial intelligence, generative AI, for example. And unfortunately, in the cybersecurity world, it tends to follow a rule that the malicious cyber actors and the criminals tend to figure out how to use these advanced tools for nefarious purposes far before we figure out all the ways that we need to defend ourselves against them. But I will say just real briefly that, and I think we will want to dive into this a little bit more about why military families, but there's some pretty stark and startling statistics out there, specifically that 40% our military families are 40% more likely to lose money to scams from some type of online security event. In fact, 4 out of 5 of our military families or veterans have already been targeted by those types of scams. And
4 out of 5. 4 out of 5. Wow. Wow.
And as I said, these can be very, very sophisticated. And in fact, 1 out of 3 of those that are targeted, they report losing money when they actually have these types of scams succeed. And so it's great that we're having this discussion today so we can better equip our families to deal with it.
Well, definitely, I think when I talk to people and just everyday folks, they understand nobody wants to have their banking account hacked into or whatnot. But I want to come to the other side of the cybersecurity issue, not from the financial sector, because we're going to talk a lot about that today, but just from this attitude and the zeitgeist of the culture right now, which I'm sure we've all heard if we're being honest, which is, well, they're already getting everything of mine, so what does it matter? They already have access to this, so I don't care. I got nothing to hide. Just have it. Why does it matter? Why should people care, Tuna?
Yeah, well, first, they don't necessarily have everything. And so anytime you're just handing information to individuals that shouldn't have it, you're going to increase your risk. Remember, a lot of times they're gathering information about you piecemeal. And maybe that last piece of information that you decided, because you have the attitude that you used to describe that unfortunately many people have, is the one piece of the puzzle they need to figure out maybe a password or to figure out how to access your network at home, etc. And so you should be extremely protective of all of your personal identifiable information, not only yourself, but everybody in your family. I mean, at the end of the day, I think our families need to remember comprehensive digital security is family security.
Comprehensive digital security is family security. And I would add one more, of course, is national security. I want to bring it back over to Mary now, because Mary, as I was watching your reaction to what Tuna was saying, I couldn't help but think, obviously, you have experience in terms of advising the senior leaders of the military and government about the unique threats of cybersecurity to our military families, but you also have personal experience with your own family, having to relocate so many times. And how many times have you had to relocate, by the way?
It's close to 20.
20 times. And so at Blue Star Families, we know that every year 600,000 military families relocate, spending on average $2,000 out of pocket. And there's a military family, of course, as we all know, in every single zip code. So Mary, I mean, when you listen to Tuna describe these cyber pieces to the puzzle, and that it oftentimes is just one small bite, BYTE, that could make all the difference in terms of hacking. When you look back at all the times you've relocated, what do you wish you would have known to better protect yourself cyber?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think there's things that I took for granted early in my career. And, you mentioned the senior leaders, right, are being targeted for their information. But I would say that every military person, no matter what their rank is, and their family members should consider themselves high profile targets. Cyber criminals are looking to exploit. And so perhaps you're the staff sergeant that works on the chairman's communications, right? Or perhaps you are the captain, right, who carries the, some other four-star general's phone. And so I think early in my career, I thought, well, I'm not a target, I'm not important. And I don't think that is a good approach. So I agree completely with Tuna that it is a family effort. The other thing that I think I should have been more aware of is when you would leave a very stressful job and you would have your work phone, and a lot of times you would incorporate handing over the phone to the next commander or the next senior enlisted leader or whoever's taking your job, and you're like, oh, I'm free, right, to go then move across the country. Well, how are you then communicating with the unit that you just left because you forgot to do something, or they had to ask you one more question about something really important that the new commander or the new senior enlisted leader or first sergeant wants to know, right? Or somebody that where you're going is like, hey, when are you going to get here, right? And asking you lots of questions. Hey, have you worked on your commander's intent? We want to make copies of it for everybody that's going to come to the change of command ceremony for your meeting that you're going to have afterwards. All of that communication, now that you've handed over your government phone, is happening on personal devices, right? Personal phones and Google and things like that. So I think that there's some risks that I probably took unnecessarily just because I didn't realize how comprehensive the threat is.
And so what is the risk though? Can you define the risk? And I know that's a broad question, but what is the risk that getting hacked in that moment, for lack of a better word, what would that potentially happen?
I would say the risk is a continuum, right? There's obvious personal risk to your own personal identity for identity theft, or other, things in your family, but there can also be unit risk. And so we talk about operational security, and a lot of people are using social media to communicate about their new unit. And that unit could still be somewhere where there's risk. A very recent example is I have a cousin who's a sailor assigned to the carrier Eisenhower, the Ike, that was in the Red Sea for 9 months with, drones. And his family was being asked, when are they coming home? And good on them, because Heather said, I can't tell you that in this public space for security reasons. And she's never been in the military, but she's sure proud of her son, and she wouldn't do anything that would put him or any of his unit or the carrier battle group at risk by sharing information that could then put other organizations at risk.
You know, there's so much that you just tapped into there, but it's also just, it's not the service member's sole responsibility. It's the whole family. It's the whole friend unit's responsibility. I would argue it's the whole nation's and their neighbors' responsibility as well. And one of the things that Kathy always says is that oftentimes it's the military who figures stuff out first for the rest of the culture to catch up to speed. And so I think a lot of the best practices and procedures that Mary and Tuna that you're describing, hopefully will be able to be implemented in the broader US culture and our neighborhoods as well, because we all have a responsibility to be cyber safe, cyber smart, especially in this day and age. And so I want to bring it back to the financial cybersecurity risk. And Allie, come on in here, because I know that you're really doing a lot of this work as the executive director of the Cybercrime Support Network. And what are some of the threats that you see that are impacting U.S. military families? It sounds like movement. It sounds like because they're always on the move, unfortunately, they're open to more risk.
Yeah. And so I'm going to add something here about kind of an internal threat, right? Your own brain. So we're always on the move. And I don't know if you guys know this, but moving is stressful and tiring and emotional, right? And that affects your decision making. So a lot of times we're in it, we're multitasking, which is not a thing, right? It's not a thing. You can't multitask. You're just task shifting, right? And every time you shift, you're focusing just a little less, right? And again, emotions are high. My children this past move were so emotional, right? And that affected me. I was not at tip-top condition. You know, Allie, who's like happy, well-rested, I got your scam, right? I got you. I see you coming. But when I'm tired and exhausted, that's when I'm vulnerable. And I think we have that overconfidence bias sometimes where we're like, I'm not dumb. I'm educated. I did my cyber awareness challenge, right? I know exactly what a scam looks like. And then we don't take into effect that this is a major transition that affects the way your brain functions. And so we need to be self-aware, which is so hard. Self-awareness is something humans are terrible at, right? But a way to combat that is laying that foundation before the stuff hits the fan, right? So that you have this unyielding routine. I got an unsolicited text message, email, phone call. I know exactly what to do. I go into my routine. I do my research. I don't even let that emotion get to me. I don't even let them play with my brain because they don't want to hack you. If they can hack your brain, they will avoid hacking your computer, your device, whatever, right? They want to hack your brain or your heart. So get that routine in. I think a big threat, again, is our brain and just not understanding that it kind of is a threat.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Wow. I mean, because it's almost like stop, drop, and roll, right?
Yeah.
When you're a kid, stop, drop, and roll,
Yeah.
you catch on fire. So I guess basically, what should your first step be? And then the second part of that, the second part of the question is, how do we solve the problem if people even know that they're being cyber attacked? If you know that, you know, hardly do I think that someone wakes up and says, let me get hacked today and let me cause a problem for the military and cyber. Like, I mean, let me put my family member at risk because I'm going to reply to this TikTok, which, by the way, I'm not on TikTok and I don't think anyone should be. But how do we even educate people to know what the risk is?
Yeah. So, all right, a lot of questions there. Let me see. I'm going to talk and you tell me if I got you. So, it's hard being a human. Like I said, right? Our brains kind of work to the scammer's advantage a lot of times. We have cognitive biases. We have dopamine and oxytocin that when they're combined, we start thinking fuzzy, right? And that's why romance scams work. Everybody likes to say people who get romance scammed or affected by a romance scam are dumb. No, they're in love, right? And if you've ever been in love, you've done some dumb things, right? Like you made some poor decisions and that's what's happening. And dopamine and oxytocin gets released even over text messages, even over emails, right? You've all had a flutter over a text or an email, right? So imagine that it's messing with your brain. So again, we have to kind of dumb it down, especially because Tuna mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm trying to say it like straight, like Tuna mentioned that, oh no, what did you mention? I got distracted by Tuna. Anyway, fuzzy brain, right? So you have to go into a battle drill. You have to go into a standard unsolicited message. I always do this, even though it's tedious, even though I know it's my mother. She sent me a weird, creepy link, right? I'm going to look up that company that she's supposedly sending me. don't click on the link, but I'm going to look up the information that she sent before I do anything, before I send any information, right? You research everything. You do your due diligence every single time it's unsolicited communication. And then again, those feelings, those emotions don't even mess with you. You don't even give them the opportunity, that doorway in. So it's kind of setting up those battle drills, or even something like automatic updates. Don't even give your brain the chance to forget to update your devices, your apps. You just automatically do it. And then you're not letting your brain kind of work against you. It's these kind of simple steps. Passwords. Oh my gosh. I know we're going to get into passwords, right? But that's human 101. Man, NordPass does the top 200 passwords every year. Last year, the #1 password was 123456. We didn't even throw in a letter, a capital. We didn't even go to 9, right? And then the #2 password was admin, all lowercase. There's nothing more human than that, right? So like, get a password manager, simplify it. It's not that humans are lazy. It's that we want to go path of least resistance, and we're really busy doing other stuff that's important to us. So know what's important to you, know where you're going to drop the ball, and do things like automatic updates, password manager, right? And I research unsolicited communication all the time.
I gotta say,
Did I
it's
get
hard
some of
to-
that, I think?
Yeah, no, it's hard to be human because it's hard to remember all these passwords. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. Someone can make a lot of, I still don't, it's tough. And then nowadays it's like, are you a robot? I'm like, I kind of wish I was a robot some days so that I could just click, yes, figure this out. for me.
Yeah, we have like 200 accounts, right? So can you remember 200 passwords? You can't.
Nope, Chip. I don't want anybody to get their money hacked. I don't want anybody when they're moving and they've got to set up a new bank account, or they've got to set up, not even a new bank account, but they have to like set up a new automatic payment or a new automatic payment for their new mortgage, or they're filling out all these forms and moving in a new neighborhood. I mean, think how can people mitigate that risk?
Yeah. Well, first I foot stomp what Allie said, right? There's a reason I think we partner with the Cybercrime Support Network. Password managers is one of your top tips, or one of my top tips, and it's great to hear someone else say it. From a security standpoint, there is more going on, right? Like when you are moving, that you are more likely, you're doing more things. You're doing more things for the first time. Your emails from people that maybe you clicked on a link looking for a rental home and you're getting an email back. So you have to be more secure in those communications, and just be wary of what you're giving out. We talk about puppy scams a lot. This doesn't have to do particularly with moving, right? But like, people buy puppies and they send people deposits for these puppies, and sometimes the puppies don't exist, and people are surprised. And it's really the same thing with rental properties. It just doesn't sound as nice as a puppy scam. If somebody that is asking you for a rental property down payment, you need to make sure that they actually are the ones that can lease the property to you, right? And that the property exists and it's not just from a photo. And that can be really hard to do depending upon your time frames, et cetera, et cetera. And just, if you think about phishing emails, right? Like if I'm sitting in my office reviewing my emails, it's a little bit of potentially a low stress environment, right? I'm just looking at emails. If I'm traveling and something's going on, and you're just more likely to fall for that, and the fraudsters know that, right? So they're trying to get your brain to act in ways that it doesn't want to act. So sometimes they'll use something familiar. So like my dad clicked on a link one time because it came from my wife's email and said, "Here, look at the photos of the kids this weekend." And he's like, "Well, why wouldn't I click on that? It came from my daughter-in-law." Like, how many times has your daughter-in-law sent you an email with a link? Zero, right? Like, and so you just, it gets back to, again, what Allie said, you have to get in these things and just like, this is the normal process, right? And I think from with the Gen AI perspective, it is going to get harder and harder because the language that gets used and the tone, it will just get better. The fraudsters can get better and better and scale in ways that I won't say it's hard for them to do today, because they actually do a pretty good job of scaling. But it is something to be more wary of, and just have that shield up at all times. which is unfortunate. Like it's not good to live that way potentially. But being paranoid is actually a pretty good way to protect your money. And we can kind of go into some other detail about smishing scams and other things. But there's a lot of different ways out there.
So the chat's blowing up right now, and everyone wants to know about these password protection. So Tuna, what password protection program should people be using? And then Allie, well, actually, no, Tuna first, and then I have another question. Yeah.
Yeah, so first, you obviously want to use very complex passwords. Everyone's seen most of the times when you log on to some site, it's going to tell you how many characters or numbers, et cetera, that you want to follow those and have the highest rating and for the complex passwords. Second, the company that I work with that partners obviously with Blue Star to help military families, Aura, one of the products they have in their comprehensive program and in their comprehensive product is exactly that. It's a password manager. Think of it as a digital vault. So you put in all of those passwords that you have for all the different types of accounts that you might have into this digital vault. And now you have access to them in one place. You're not putting them in unsecure locations like on your phone or on your desktop or writing them down on a piece of paper that could fall in somebody's hands. Second, by giving them or putting them in that vault, Aura now looks on the dark web, looks all across the internet to see any indication that those passwords, even actually things that are close to your password, are being used, and then they will proactively notify you if that's happening so that you can take the proper response.
That's awesome. And a quick show of hands from the panel before I come back to Mary. Do you recommend, yes, raise your hand if you think it's okay to store your passwords in your computers?
Like just like on a document on your desktop?
No, just like auto, like when you click remember password so that it'll just automatically.
Oh, like on your browser, browser?
Yeah.
I don't recommend that. I don't, but that's just me.
Chip?
I do not.
Tuna?
No, I do not. I mean, if your device falls into somebody's hands, they have access, they can log on to that account. I mean,
or this guy's got it right after this. Log out of some accounts. That's all I'm saying. Hey, Mary, I'm assuming that it's going to be over 5. You don't recommend doing that either?
No, and I don't recommend you sync your browser across all your devices with all your stored passwords.
Definitely do that too. Okay, good to know. Good to know. I'll be note to self. I want to come back to moving though, and in all seriousness, it is really tricky to have to move so many times. And Mary, over the course of your career and your expertise, you picked up a lot of tips about how to mitigate some of the risk when you're applying for rentals, for example, and you're moving. What are some of those tips that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think it's important, back to some of those Facebook pages where people are trying to share information and help other military families. I've lost track of how many times I've seen somebody say, I'm moving and I'm helping out my landlord because he likes military families in his house. And so I'm posting for him, here's our house, here's all the details, here's what you need to know about the schools. Okay, well, you've just told the world what your former address was, and they now know you're moving. And I don't know about everybody else, but I get a lot of unsolicited credit card applications, and those will still be coming to my house because they don't forward those, right? And so when we talked about Tuna's comment about that last piece of information, right? Because you've moved to a new place and like, well, you haven't lived here for 2 years. Well, now somebody knows where you did live for the previous 2 years. And so I think there's really good intentions, but being like, there's no reason your landlord can't market the rental house themselves, right? Instead of you doing that for them and giving away more of your information. And so I just think, and again, in the DC area, it is a very tough market. It absolutely is, in other places. But in the effort to help military families, you're putting yourself at risk, and you might be putting them at risk also. And so I would just ask people, when you're getting ready to move and you're starting to share information, to think, back to what you're stressed, and there's a lot of pressure. Like, I just need to have somewhere to live. My kids, I need to register my kids for school, and I need a signed lease, right? It is so stressful. But there's some risk that I think we're not thinking about when you just start checking everything off your checklist.
Well, I think that's exactly the point, is we're not thinking about it. And I don't think anyone really is. I think it's not a part of the culture yet to think about it. I mean, it should really be as simple as locking your doors before when you leave the house. It should be as simple as putting duct tape over a box when you're moving. So to your point, Allie, take the humanness out of it and just immediately go into the to-do list. What should the to-do list be? Okay, you find out you have to move. What should the first cyber secure step be that you take?
So I'm gonna take a squishy route again. I know you're like human out of it, but I'm gonna talk to my family, right, about passwords, especially my teenagers, right? Because I hope I know what accounts they have, but just in case, I'm gonna talk to them about passwords too. And I'm also gonna talk to my teenagers about phishing and what to look for and remind them, right? Because to Mary's point, we're moving, and so we may be getting new things as we're accidentally giving our location out, right? We're getting all this new information, whatever. I want to reiterate what phishing looks like. So everybody's passwords get updated. MFA gets implemented on everything. If it isn't already, it should be, right? Because that's your second line of defense. If you're using password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least have an MFA on there, people, right? Have that second layer. And then privacy settings, again, to Mary's point, great point, Facebook, social media, all that business, they are constantly collecting on you. And yes, you may not have any money for them to steal, but if they get enough of your information, they can take loans out in your name. They can take credit cards in your name, and then you're in bad shape, right? You're in worse shape because now you have negative money versus no money. So that's something I think people don't think about as well. Or they just use your identity to commit terrible crimes like romance scams or identity theft or other things like that. So you don't want a romance scam victim knocking on your door because they are angry, right? They are angry. And I have had many people I've talked to who have hundreds or thousands of romance scam victims knocking on their door because they think.
Tell us about one, because in the prep for this, I was told that this might come up, and I was like, what do you mean by that? When they
so I'll keep it military, right? Scammers love to impersonate military because there's a reason why you wouldn't be able to meet someone in person, right? I am deployed on a super secret mission to Syria, right? Everybody's a 3-star general in Syria on a super secret mission. And the American public may not necessarily know a lot about the military. And so they'll be like, oh my gosh, thank you for your service. I want to send you whatever you need, right? And so military impersonation is really huge. So again, Mary, thank you so much for bringing that up. Lock down your Facebook privacy settings, right? Because they want your pictures. They want your military photos. They want the family's photos too. So they can say, oh, I'm in the military. I'm in Syria on the super secret mission, but my son is sick in the UK and I need you to send me money so I can give him medical treatment, right? So they'll steal your family's photos too. Now, eventually the victims will discover who the real person is, right? Over research and obsession, right? Because they're like, why can't you meet me after the 6 months? And they will hunt down the real person, the real soldier. And imagine being a spouse and your service member is getting called hundreds of times a week. Imagine how that affects your marriage, your family, your just life in general, right? I have talked to many service members. This is the side of the story that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it is devastating for both the romance scam victim and the service member who's getting impersonated.
That's wild. Yeah, it definitely doesn't get talked about. Tuna, to bring it back to you, I mean, talking to your kids about this, like, and especially, I think a lot of people culturally are used to hearing comments such as "Don't get in a car with a stranger" or "Don't talk to strangers." How do we translate what's happening in IRL in real life to what's happening to URL on the digital frontier? So how do you have this really tough conversation on a really like technological topic that quite honestly, a lot of adults don't even understand? And how do you dumb it down so that a kid can understand it?
Yeah, Kevin, this is really important. And you know, I have a 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I've been going through this like a lot of the military families over the last couple of years. But first, just to touch on something you said there at the end, they are more aware than you are probably in a lot of cases about actually the way the online environment, if you will, the digital environment works. They use it a lot in school and for homework and things like that. And of course, that can then expand out into the types of things that they may do online during their free time. But I think the first thing is to really educate yourself and to educate your kids. And if your children are old enough to be online without your direct supervision, then they're old enough for a very direct conversation about the threats that exist out there and for what people may try to do to not only gain information about themselves or your family at large so they can commit some type of fraud like we've talked about, or as we know, sometimes actually prey on the children themselves. And I think the biggest thing is to have that frank conversation with them. I have a colleague at Aura who also said something I think is fantastic advice. And she said, friend, follow, and lead by example. So friend and follow. So you're talking if your children are gonna have some type of online presence, make sure you're friending them, they're friending you, you're following them, they're following you, and then lead by example on how you conduct yourself online. You're not trying to stalk them online, you're respecting their online freedom, but that way you can maintain very good awareness about what they're doing, who they're talking to, when they're talking to them. And then, like I said, set the right example. Teach good digital citizenship, if you will.
Really, really interesting. And especially, I think a lot of parents are very concerned about cybersecurity for their kids. And it's like adults are supposed to set the rules, but at the same time, if they don't even know how to use the technology themselves or understand the social media, or even, the way that people talk online and that language is definitely definitely tricky. Friend, follow, and lead. Friend, follow, and lead. Chip, so let's say, what do you do when you get hacked? When you look at your bank account, you notice that something's off, you've settled in, you've taken all the right steps, you have the most complicated password in the history with characters and emojis and uppercase, lowercase, but they still figure it out. What should your first step be?
Call your financial institution. Ali mentioned MFA, right? Just so everyone knows, that's multi-factor authentication, right? So if you are coming in from an unrecognized device to most financial institutions, but definitely for Navy Federal, like we will challenge that login, right? So we'll send you a 6-digit code. Fraudsters know that. So how do fraudsters get past that, right? They pretend to be us, right? And so they'll send you a text message saying, hey, did you do this $500 Zelle transaction? And then all of a sudden that gets back to the human aspect of it. Your heartbeat goes up, your brain stops to function, and you're like, no, I didn't do this. And I'm trying to pay, I have to pay the rent, right? So I need that $500. And yes or no. And you say no. And then they're like, great, well, we're going to call you. So they're pretending to be us. They spoof our telephone numbers, right? So again, it's one of those things when you're talking about educating the family, right? Like just because your caller ID says this is Navy Federal doesn't mean it's Navy Federal. Matter of fact, that has nothing to do with that, right? Just because I sent you a text and said I was Navy Federal, it doesn't mean it's Navy Federal. We send texts, but so do the bad guys, right? And then you talk about that attack vector. It wouldn't offend us if it really was us that was talking to you, for you to say, you know what, I need to call you, hang up the phone and call the FI. It won't offend the real person. The fraudster will try and keep you on the phone because normally they're potentially talking to Navy Federal on the other line, right? They're working as a partner, and they may be on the phone with our contact center. They may be social engineering that one-time passcode to get into your online system to send the money, to apply for the loan, open up a credit card. So all those things. So, you know, number one rule of thumb is feel free to hang up and call your financial institution.
Mary, do you have any strong opinions on VPNs?
So I do. And again, the lessons that you learn over time. The first time I became very interested in VPNs is when I was comparing notes to get ready to deploy to Afghanistan, because you can't stream your favorite shows from Afghanistan.
Makes sense. That's a really good thing to get
And so
into.
I was like, and they're like, yeah, you got to make sure you've got all your devices ready to go with the VPNs, you know, so that when you're in Afghanistan, you know, and I was in Kabul, so I had Wi-Fi, you know, apologies to my non-Air Force deployers. So that's when I became more of an expert in how to use them and how to set them up and how to configure them. And then over time became more aware of how easy it is to set up and configure a Wi-Fi based on the cyber wars I had with my son in trying to lock down his Wi-Fi. We had the MAD network, mom and dad network, and then we had the kid network. But I became aware of how easy it is to, you know, go to the Washington airport and name a Wi-Fi, free Washington, you know, Wi-Fi, and sit at a gate where all the members of Congress fly home during the recess, or in a hotel, right? Free Marriott lobby Wi-Fi, super easy. And so having a VPN when you're using a public free Wi-Fi, or even if it's not free, maybe you paid, you know, that would be genius in my mind. If somebody were to set up, you know, a Wi-Fi, name it secure, you know, what DCA or IAD, the airports, you know, and then charge you $4.95. And people say, oh, I'll use the one that costs $4.95 because it's secure versus the free one, and it might be the free one is the real one. You could avoid or reduce, I don't want to say completely avoid, but you could reduce some of that risk if you became very comfortable with a reliable VPN.
That's too nice. I see that you've got some thoughts on this.
No, I agree 100% with what Mary's saying. And you want to have a VPN on your home network, but the nice thing is if you get it through a company like Aura, it goes with your devices. So when you are out and about, you can activate it and then you get that type of protection. But you also want to make sure that you have antivirus solutions on your home network and your devices as well. That's very important. And real quickly, Kevin, I just wanted to mention, go back to something that we were talking about. If you find that you were the victim of some type of fraud, or you think you might be a victim of some type of fraud, all of our military folks, family members and military members that are listening, you do not have to be a customer of Aura, a paying customer, to utilize their free customer service line. You can call them and they will help you if you believe you've been a victim or you know that you've been a victim of some type of fraud. It's a great service for our military folks.
Really, really important. And just knowing who to call, knowing where to go, so incredibly important. Before we get to the final questions around the horn, Allie, you mentioned something earlier in this conversation that I do think is worth coming back to, which is just the battle to, it's not even just to get someone's data or their password, but over their mind. Can you just explain what you meant by that a little bit, and maybe like a worst case example that you're thinking of as you said it?
So an emotional manipulation example. So, I mean, phishing is emotional manipulation, right? Spear phishing is really great because it's pinpointed. Hey, I'm Jim. I work with you. I need you to give me your work password, right? Worst case scenarios, oof, I mean, I do have a lot of stories of, again, we have that romance scam program, and it will blow your mind of things that happen. Again, even just the pictures that are sent, right? There are intimate pictures that are sent and then used as blackmail, right? To continue to send money because you don't want your intimate pictures sent to family, friends, boss, right? We know right now in the media the things that are happening with teenage boys and the Yahoo boys in Nigeria. I don't know if everyone's following, but basically teenage boys are committing suicide because this scam ring, this crime ring is saying, I'm going to give your, your pictures to your family and friends and ruin your life. And so these poor teenage boys are killing themselves because they can't handle the alternative. So I think right now that is something that's sticking in my mind very clearly as one of the worst ways you can emotionally manipulate someone in order to get their money or information, especially our youth, right? So when we say have these conversations with your children, oh my gosh, if you take nothing from today, please talk to your teenagers. And I do want to add one quick thing to the great points that have already been said. Try this method, right? Because if you just say the internet is dangerous or bad, your kids are going to be like, but mom, dad, you're on it. Right? So if it's so bad, why are you on it? Try instead saying it's a tricky stranger, right? We do this with stranger danger is no longer a thing. It's now tricky stranger, right? Because you want your kid to go to the police officer who's a stranger. You don't want them to go to the creepy guy in the van who's a stranger, right? So the internet is a tricky stranger that you always have to be asking questions of. You always have to be confirming, and you have to use your trusted network, your mom, your dad, right? Hey, mom, dad, I see this, right? What is this? I am your trusted network. I'm here to help you work through it. So ask those questions, use your trusted network. It's a tricky stranger. It's awesome and terrible all at the same time. And that's kind of a way to have that starter
Yeah,
conversation.
your human network is more important, especially when you're talking to your kids about it, than your digital network. And that can be a good reference point. All right. I wanted to go around, also elderly. I see that from Sierra, agree, having that conversation with older folks as well. I want to go around the horn. We're going to start with Chip. Tuna, I'm going to give you the last word. So we'll go Chip, Allie, Mary, Tuna. One takeaway from today, keep it simple, that you hope people watching, listening, reading the transcript, that people take away from this discussion. Chip.
I already foot stomps password managers, and we talked about that. I will say we have a 1Password sponsorship through Navy Federal, so if anyone's members, they can do that. But I would say transaction alerts is really important. So you can sign up for those. You can freeze and unfreeze your cards with most FIs. So take advantage. Look around the security of your financial institutions and take advantage of their security offerings.
Allie.
Embrace being human, you guys. You're going to make mistakes. Just be prepared for it, right? And if you've got good passwords and you have MFA, it's not going to be that bad, right? So I believe in you. We can do this. We can do this.
I appreciate that. I'm going to unlog out of everything. I can just hear Allie's voice. Mary, what do you have for us?
I would say that even though we've covered a lot of territory today, there's really more out there. And so whether you go to Military One Source or the resources that have been popping up in the chat, or CISA, CISA has information for families, that you may have a situation that we didn't talk about, right? Signs for parents to know if their children are being cyberbullied, right? And these tricky people change their tactics and techniques. And so at these same resources, they're like, hey, this is what the bad guy is doing. And so try to stay ahead, keep learning, just like the people who are here today. Keep learning and use resources and try to stay one step ahead of the tricky people or the bad guys.
They're cockroaches. They keep coming back. Tuna.
I'm going to repeat something that I said earlier, and it's comprehensive digital security is family security. And every military family needs a product that is truly comprehensive. It's not good enough to just protect your ID and then leave your home network vulnerable. It's not good enough to worry about your credit rating, but then you don't have parental control set up on your home network. You really need to think comprehensively so you can protect your family.
Really, that's honestly the thing that registered with me today the most is really trying to find those ways of, you have a fire escape plan. Kids learn about that in school. If their house gets on fire, you know, this is what you do. You grab your things, you know, you run outside. I mean, that's a comprehensive fire plan. And so the digital plan from a child's perspective or from your elderly senior citizens perspective is doing just that. It's knowing where to go, like Mary's talking about. CIS is a great resource. And then it's knowing how to change your password, like Allie's talking about, or what to do in the financial system if someone steals your money. But having that comprehensive digital plan, as Tuna put it so simply, to be honest, is family security. You lock your door, you got to have the plan for the digital stuff as well. I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Chip, Allie, Mary, Tuna. Thank you guys so much for taking an hour of your time. Thank you to everybody who logged on and who's watching. And you can learn more about all of these issues at the look at some of the links in the chat. But at Blue Star Family's website, we've got all of that online as well. Thank you to Ryan Callahan and Ryan's team for putting this together. And of course to Kathy Roth-Duquet, our fearless CEO of Blue Star Families. And thank you all for all you do in the military and in this space as well. I guess that's it. I'm Kevin Cirilli. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.